February 13, 1988. Millbrook, New York. Some lies cost you a scolding from your parents. This one cost a life. On a frigid February morning in 1988, a mother's worst nightmare became reality when she discovered her daughter's empty bed. What started as a missing person case in upstate New York would evolve into one of the most perplexing cold cases in FBI history, remaining unsolved for over 3 decades until cutting-edge DNA technology finally revealed a truth so shocking it would shatter an entire community's sense of security. The story begins in the quiet town of Millbrook, New York, population barely 1,500, where everyone knew everyone, and doors were rarely locked. This was small-town America at its most innocent, a place where children rode their bikes until dark, where neighbors watched out for each other, and where violent crime was something that happened in big cities, not here. February 14th, 1988. Valentine's Day. While most teenagers were thinking about school dances and first crushes, 15-year-old Rebecca Martinez was planning something different. The honor student and varsity track runner had told her parents she was spending the night at her best friend's house to work on a history project. It was a lie that would haunt her family forever. Rebecca was the kind of teenager every parent dreams of raising. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, volunteer at the local animal shelter. She had college applications spread across her bedroom desk, dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and a future that seemed limitless. Her teachers described her as mature beyond her years, responsible, and utterly trustworthy. Which is why, when her mother called her friend's house that Sunday morning and discovered Rebecca had never arrived, the world seemed to tilt off its axis. The Martinez family had moved to Millbrook just 3 years earlier, when Rebecca's father, a construction foreman, found steady work rebuilding the town's historic covered bridge. They were hard-working people who had finally found their slice of the American dream in this picturesque Hudson Valley community. Rebecca's mother worked part-time at the local library. Her father coached Little League on weekends, and they attended St. Mary's Catholic Church every Sunday without fail. What made Rebecca's disappearance even more baffling was her character. This wasn't a rebellious teenager running away from home. She had never been in trouble, never stayed out past curfew, never given her parents a moment's worry. Her bedroom was neat, her homework completed, her track medals polished and displayed with pride. The idea that she would simply vanish into thin air was incomprehensible. The last confirmed sighting of Rebecca Martinez was at 6:47 p.m. on Saturday, February 13th, captured by the security camera at Miller's General Store, where she purchased a pack of gum and a Valentine's card. The grainy black and white footage would become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in the case, studied frame by investigators for years to come. Store owner Harold Miller remembered the transaction clearly. Rebecca seemed normal, perhaps a bit distracted, but nothing that raised any red flags. She paid with exact change, smiled politely, and walked out into the February evening. It was the last time anyone would see her alive. What happened in the hours between that security footage and Sunday morning, when her empty bed was discovered, would remain a mystery for 34 years. The case would consume the Millbrook Police Department, attract FBI attention, generate thousands of tips, and ultimately go cold, leaving a family destroyed and a community forever changed. But this story doesn't end in 1988. It ends in 2022, when a routine DNA sample entered into a federal database would finally connect the dots in a case that had stumped investigators for over 3 decades. The truth, when it finally emerged, would prove that sometimes the most dangerous predators hide in plain sight, and that justice, while delayed, can still prevail. This is the story of Rebecca Martinez, a 15-year-old girl whose disappearance would expose the dark underbelly of small-town America and prove that evil can lurk behind the most ordinary faces. It's a story of a family's relentless pursuit of truth, a community's loss of innocence, and the power of modern science to finally deliver justice when all hope seemed lost. The investigation that followed would span decades, involve multiple law enforcement agencies, and ultimately reveal connections to other unsolved cases across the Northeast. It would challenge everything the residents of Millbrook thought they knew about their safe haven and force them to confront the uncomfortable reality that monsters don't always look like monsters. Rebecca's story begins on that snowy Valentine's Day weekend in 1988, but it doesn't end there. It continues through years of false leads, dead ends, and heartbreak, until finally, in an age of genetic genealogy and advanced forensic science, the truth would emerge from the shadows where it had hidden for so long. The year 1988 marked a pivotal moment in American history. Ronald Reagan was finishing his second term as president, the Berlin Wall still divided East and West Germany, and the internet was nothing more than a government research project. In small towns across America, life moved at a different pace, governed by church bells, school schedules, and the changing seasons. Millbrook, New York, nestled in the Hudson Valley approximately 60 miles north of Manhattan, embodied everything Americans cherished about small-town life. Founded in 1869 as a railroad stop, the town had grown slowly and deliberately around its main industries: agriculture, small manufacturing, and tourism from city dwellers seeking weekend retreats in the countryside. The town's main street stretched for exactly 4 blocks, lined with family-owned businesses that had served the community for generations. Miller's General Store anchored the commercial district, flanked by Peterson's Hardware, the Millbrook Diner, and Murphy's Pharmacy. The red brick post office, built during the Great Depression, stood as a testament to federal investment in rural America, while St. Mary's Catholic Church and First Baptist Church bookended the residential area, their steeples visible from anywhere in town. Most residents worked either in town or commuted to larger cities like Poughkeepsie or Albany. The local economy depended heavily on seasonal tourism, with city families renting cabins along Miller's Pond during summer months and returning for fall foliage tours. Winter brought a quieter rhythm, when neighbors relied on each other for everything from snow removal to childcare. Rebecca Martinez had adapted quickly to this close-knit environment after her family's move from Queens in 1985. The transition from urban anonymity to small-town visibility had initially challenged the 15-year-old, but she soon discovered the advantages of a community where teachers knew every student's name, and local business owners treated teenagers with respect and trust. At Millbrook High School, Rebecca excelled academically while participating in multiple extracurricular activities. Her track coach, veteran educator Margaret Henley, had coached 3 generations of local athletes and immediately recognized Rebecca's potential. The teenager's discipline and natural speed earned her a spot on the varsity team as a sophomore, an unusual achievement that garnered respect from older students and community members alike. Rebecca's academic performance impressed her teachers consistently. Her English teacher noted her exceptional writing ability, particularly her skill in crafting persuasive arguments for the debate team. Her science teacher praised her methodical approach to laboratory experiments and her genuine curiosity about veterinary medicine. Her guidance counselor had already begun discussing college scholarship opportunities, recognizing that Rebecca's combination of athletic ability and academic excellence could open doors to prestigious universities. The Martinez family had integrated seamlessly into Millbrook's social fabric. Rebecca's father, Miguel, quickly earned respect for his craftsmanship and reliability on construction projects throughout the Hudson Valley. Her mother, Carmen, became a beloved fixture at the library, where her bilingual skills helped serve the town's small but growing Hispanic population. The family's regular attendance at St. Mary's Catholic Church and their participation in community events like the annual Harvest Festival demonstrated their commitment to their new home. Rebecca's daily routine reflected the predictable rhythms of small-town teenage life. She walked to school each morning, often stopping to help elderly neighbors with small tasks. After classes, she either attended track practice or worked on debate team preparations. Evenings were reserved for homework, family dinner, and occasional social activities with her close circle of friends. The teenagers' social circle consisted primarily of other high-achieving students who shared her interests in academics and athletics. She maintained friendships with classmates from various backgrounds, demonstrating the kind of easy social integration that characterized successful small-town residents. Her friends described her as loyal, trustworthy, and remarkably mature for her age. In February 1988, Rebecca was planning her junior year course schedule and researching college programs in veterinary medicine. She had recently received encouraging feedback from a pre-veterinary advisor at Cornell University and was considering applying for their summer program for high school students. Her future seemed not just bright, but carefully planned and entirely achievable. Saturday, February 13th, 1988, began like any other weekend for Rebecca Martinez. She completed her morning chores, helped her mother prepare lunch, and spent the afternoon reviewing notes for an upcoming debate tournament. The weather forecast predicted light snow overnight, typical for a Hudson Valley February, and most residents planned quiet evenings at home. Rebecca's deception began with a carefully constructed lie told to her parents during dinner. She explained that her friend Amanda Wilson needed help completing a challenging history project about the Industrial Revolution, and they planned to work late into the evening at the Wilson house. Since the project was due Monday morning, Rebecca requested permission to spend the night, allowing them to finish their research and presentation. The request seemed entirely reasonable to Miguel and Carmen Martinez. Rebecca had never given them cause for concern, and the Wilson family was well known in the community. Amanda's father worked as a supervisor at the local paper mill, and her mother taught third grade at Millbrook Elementary. The families had developed a friendship through school events and church activities. What Rebecca's parents didn't know was that Amanda Wilson was spending the weekend visiting her grandmother in Albany, and Rebecca had fabricated the entire story. The teenager had never attempted such an elaborate deception before, making her motivation for lying a crucial element that investigators would struggle to understand for decades. After dinner, Rebecca packed an overnight bag with typical teenage essentials: pajamas, toiletries, a change of clothes for Sunday, and her history textbook to maintain the pretense of academic work. She kissed her parents goodbye at approximately 6:15 p.m. and walked out into the crisp February evening, her breath visible in small puffs as she headed toward downtown Millbrook. The security footage from Miller's General Store captured Rebecca's final confirmed public appearance at 6:47 p.m. The timestamp showed her entering the store alone, browsing the candy aisle briefly, and approaching the counter with a pack of spearmint gum and a Valentine's card featuring cartoon hearts. Store owner Harold Miller later recalled that Rebecca seemed slightly nervous, but attributed it to typical teenage shyness. The Valentine's card purchase puzzled investigators from the beginning. Rebecca had never mentioned having a boyfriend to her parents, friends, or teachers. Her close friends confirmed that she wasn't romantically involved with anyone at school, and her busy schedule of academics and athletics left little time for dating. The card's intended recipient became one of the case's most enduring mysteries. After leaving Miller's General Store, Rebecca Martinez effectively vanished. No additional security cameras captured her movements, no witnesses reported seeing her on the streets, and no evidence suggested she had reached any intended destination. The approximately 12-hour gap between her departure from the store and the discovery of her absence the following morning represented a complete void in the timeline. Sunday morning brought the horrifying discovery that would shatter the Martinez family forever. When Carmen Martinez called the Wilson house at 8:30 a.m. to check on the girls' progress with their project, she learned that Amanda had been in Albany all weekend and knew nothing about any planned study session. The realization that Rebecca had lied about her whereabouts sent immediate panic through both families. Miguel Martinez drove frantically through Millbrook's quiet Sunday morning streets, checking every location where Rebecca might have gone. He stopped at the homes of her closest friends, visited the school building, and even checked the town's small commercial district. Each negative response deepened his growing dread. By 10:00 a.m., the Martinez family had contacted the Millbrook Police Department to report their daughter missing. The initial response reflected the department's inexperience with serious crimes. Chief Robert Kellerman, a 20-year veteran who had dealt primarily with minor theft and occasional domestic disputes, initially suggested that Rebecca might have simply stayed with a different friend and forgotten to call home. The police department's casual initial response would later become a source of intense criticism and regret. Valuable hours passed while officers assumed Rebecca would return home on her own, a delay that potentially compromised crucial evidence and witness memories. The department's lack of experience with missing person cases, particularly involving teenagers, became immediately apparent as the investigation began in earnest. By Sunday evening, when Rebecca failed to return home and no friends or acquaintances could account for her whereabouts, the reality of the situation became undeniable. Rebecca Martinez had not simply stayed out too late or forgotten to call home. Something terrible had happened to the responsible, trustworthy teenager who had never caused her family a moment's worry. The Millbrook Police Department's investigation into Rebecca Martinez's disappearance began with a series of critical errors that would haunt the case for decades. Chief Robert Kellerman's small force of 4 officers had never handled a missing person case involving potential foul play, and their inexperience showed immediately in their approach to evidence collection and witness interviews. The first major mistake occurred at the Martinez family home. Officers failed to properly secure Rebecca's bedroom as a potential crime scene, allowing family members and friends to enter freely during the initial hours of the investigation. Crucial evidence that might have provided insights into Rebecca's state of mind or plans for that evening was potentially contaminated or destroyed through well-meaning but misguided attempts to search for clues. Detective Frank Morrison, the department's only investigator with any experience in serious crimes, didn't arrive at the scene until Monday morning, nearly 24 hours after Rebecca's disappearance was reported. By then, dozens of people had trampled through areas that should have been preserved for forensic examination. The delay in treating the case as a potential crime rather than a simple runaway situation cost investigators valuable time and evidence. The investigation's focus initially centered on Rebecca's social circle, with officers conducting interviews at Millbrook High School. However, their questioning techniques revealed their lack of training in dealing with traumatized teenagers. Many of Rebecca's friends became defensive and uncooperative when officers suggested that Rebecca might have been involved in activities her parents didn't know about, including drug use or secret relationships. Amanda Wilson, whose name Rebecca had used in her fabricated story, became the first person of interest despite having a solid alibi. Officers spent 3 days verifying her whereabouts in Albany, interviewing her grandmother, checking bus schedules, and reviewing her school attendance records. This focus on Amanda delayed the investigation into other potential leads and suspects. The search for Rebecca's physical location began with volunteer efforts organized by the Martinez family and local churches. However, the lack of professional coordination meant that potential evidence was overlooked or destroyed by well-meaning searchers. Areas around Miller's Pond, the town's most likely location for concealing evidence, were trampled by dozens of volunteers before trained investigators could properly examine them. Detective Morrison's investigation took a significant wrong turn when he focused intensively on Rebecca's track coach, Margaret Henley. Anonymous tips suggested that Henley had shown inappropriate interest in female athletes, leading to weeks of investigation that ultimately proved baseless. The rumors stemmed from a disgruntled former student whose allegations were never substantiated, but the investigation consumed valuable resources and damaged Henley's reputation permanently. The department's handling of the Valentine's card evidence demonstrated their forensic limitations. The card was handled by multiple people without gloves, compromising any potential fingerprint evidence. When the card was finally sent to the state crime lab for analysis, the results were inconclusive due to contamination. Modern DNA testing techniques that might have revealed crucial information were still years away from development. Media attention brought both help and hindrance to the investigation. Local newspapers and radio stations publicized Rebecca's disappearance, generating hundreds of tips from concerned citizens. However, the police department lacked the personnel and systems to properly process and follow up on these leads. Many potentially valuable tips were lost in the chaos, while officers wasted time pursuing obviously false information. The investigation's most significant error involved the failure to properly canvass the area around Miller's General Store. Officers conducted cursory interviews with nearby business owners, but failed to systematically question residents in the surrounding neighborhoods. Several witnesses who might have seen Rebecca after she left the store were never interviewed during the crucial first weeks of the investigation. State police assistants arrived 3 weeks after Rebecca's disappearance, but by then, the trail had grown cold. The New York State Police brought professional investigative techniques and resources that the local department lacked, but the damage from the initial mishandling of the case had already been done. Evidence was compromised. Witnesses' memories had faded, and crucial time had been lost. The early investigation's failures would plague the case for years to come, creating obstacles that even the most skilled investigators would struggle to overcome. By the summer of 1989, the Rebecca Martinez investigation had officially become a cold case. The New York State Police had exhausted their leads, interviewed over 200 people, and followed up on more than 500 tips without finding any concrete evidence of what happened to the missing teenager. The case file, now spanning 3 thick binders, was transferred to the cold case unit where it would remain largely untouched for the next 2 decades. The impact on the Martinez family was devastating and permanent. Miguel Martinez aged visibly during the first year after Rebecca's disappearance, his hair turning gray and deep lines etching themselves around his eyes. He continued working construction jobs throughout the Hudson Valley, but co-workers noticed his decreased concentration and frequent absences when new tips or potential sightings emerged. The man who had once been known for his reliability and attention to detail became distracted and prone to mistakes. Carmen Martinez channeled her grief into activism, becoming a vocal advocate for missing children and improved police procedures. She established the Rebecca Martinez Foundation in 1991, which provided resources and support for families of missing persons throughout New York State. The foundation's annual fundraising dinner became a Hudson Valley tradition, drawing hundreds of supporters and keeping Rebecca's case in the public eye even as media attention waned. The town of Millbrook struggled to return to its previous sense of security and innocence. Parents who had once allowed their children to walk freely around town began driving them to school and activities. The annual Harvest Festival, once a carefree celebration of community spirit, took on a more somber tone as residents gathered each year to remember Rebecca and other missing children. Local businesses installed additional security cameras and lighting, transforming the quaint downtown area into something more resembling a fortress than a welcoming small town. Millbrook High School retired Rebecca's track jersey number and established a scholarship in her name, for students pursuing veterinary medicine. Her former teammates continued competing, but the joy had gone out of the sport for many of them. Coach Margaret Henley, despite being cleared of any wrongdoing, requested a transfer to another school district, unable to bear the constant reminders of her missing athlete. The case attracted periodic attention from true crime enthusiasts and amateur investigators, particularly after the rise of internet forums in the late 1990s. Online communities dedicated to cold cases featured extensive discussions about Rebecca's disappearance, generating new theories and occasionally providing tips to law enforcement. However, most of these amateur investigations led nowhere, and some caused additional pain for the Martinez family by spreading unfounded rumors and conspiracy theories. Detective Frank Morrison retired in 1995, carrying the weight of the unsolved case with him. His replacement, Detective Lisa Chen, inherited the Rebecca Martinez file along with dozens of other cold cases. Chen periodically reviewed the evidence, hoping that new forensic techniques or fresh perspectives might reveal previously overlooked clues. She submitted evidence for DNA testing as the technology became available, but the degraded samples yielded no useful results. The case received renewed attention in 2003 when America's Most Wanted featured Rebecca's disappearance in a segment about cold cases from the 1980s. The television exposure generated hundreds of new tips, but none provided the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. The show's reconstruction of Rebecca's final known movements brought the case back into national consciousness temporarily, but the renewed interest faded within months. Local newspapers marked significant anniversaries of Rebecca's disappearance with retrospective articles, interviewing family members and law enforcement officials about the ongoing investigation. These articles served to keep the case alive in public memory, but also served as painful reminders for the Martinez family of their continuing loss and unanswered questions. The advent of social media in the 2000s created new opportunities for spreading awareness about Rebecca's case. Facebook pages and Twitter accounts dedicated to missing persons regularly featured her photograph and case details. The Martinez family embraced these new tools, sharing updates and appeals for information across multiple platforms. By 2010, Rebecca Martinez would have been 37 years old. Her parents, now in their 60s, had never stopped hoping for answers, but had learned to live with the uncertainty that defined their daily existence. The bedroom Rebecca had occupied remained largely unchanged, a shrine to a life cut short and dreams never realized. The case file continued to grow as new tips arrived sporadically, but the likelihood of solving a 22-year-old disappearance seemed increasingly remote. Law enforcement officials privately acknowledged that without new evidence or a confession, Rebecca Martinez's fate might never be known. The breakthrough in the Rebecca Martinez case came from an unexpected source in March 2022, 34 years after her disappearance. A routine arrest in Buffalo, New York, for domestic violence would finally provide the key that unlocked one of the Hudson Valley's most enduring mysteries. The suspect, 48-year-old maintenance worker David Kruger, was required to submit a DNA sample as part of his booking process, a standard procedure that had become commonplace in criminal justice systems across the country. Kruger's DNA sample was processed through the Combined DNA Index System, known as CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database that contains profiles from convicted offenders, arrestees, and evidence from unsolved crimes. The system, which had been gradually expanded since its inception in the 1990s, now contained millions of genetic profiles that could be cross-referenced against evidence from cold cases spanning decades. The match came back within 72 hours. Kruger's DNA profile showed a direct correlation with genetic material that had been recovered from Rebecca Martinez's clothing, evidence that had been preserved in the New York State Police evidence locker since 1988. The original testing in the late 1980s had been unable to extract usable DNA profiles due to technological limitations, but advances in forensic science had made it possible to analyze even severely degraded samples. FBI Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, assigned to the Bureau's Cold Case Initiative, received the notification about the DNA match on a Tuesday morning in March. Rodriguez had been working cold cases for 8 years, but the Rebecca Martinez file represented one of the oldest successful matches she had encountered. The agent immediately contacted the New York State Police and began coordinating a joint investigation to build a comprehensive case against Kruger. The investigation into David Kruger revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that had gone undetected for decades. Born in 1974, Kruger would have been 14 years old at the time of Rebecca's disappearance, making him a juvenile suspect who had never appeared on investigators' radar during the original investigation. His family had lived in Millbrook during the 1980s, where his father worked as a custodian at the high school and his mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the area. FBI behavioral analysts constructed a profile of Kruger's movements and activities during February 1988. School records showed that he had been suspended from Millbrook High School for fighting just 2 days before Rebecca's disappearance, placing him in the downtown area during the crucial time period. Former classmates, when interviewed by federal agents, described Kruger as a troubled teenager who had displayed aggressive behavior toward female students and had been suspected of minor thefts around town. The investigation revealed that Kruger's family had moved away from Millbrook in the summer of 1988, just months after Rebecca's disappearance. His father had lost his job at the high school under circumstances that school officials declined to discuss, and the family had relocated to Western New York, where they maintained a low profile for several years. Advanced DNA analysis conducted at the FBI laboratory in Quantico provided additional evidence linking Kruger to the crime. Genetic material found under Rebecca's fingernails, previously too degraded for analysis, yielded a partial profile that was consistent with Kruger's DNA. The evidence suggested that Rebecca had fought her attacker, managing to scratch him during the assault. Federal investigators also employed genetic genealogy techniques, comparing Kruger's DNA profile with publicly available genetic databases to trace his family lineage and confirm his identity. This cutting-edge approach, which had been used successfully in other high-profile cold cases, including the Golden State Killer investigation, provided additional confirmation of the match. The FBI's investigation expanded to examine other unsolved cases from areas where Kruger had lived throughout his adult life. Preliminary analysis suggested potential connections to at least 3 other missing person cases in Western New York and Pennsylvania, though those investigations remained ongoing. On April 15, 2022, a federal grand jury in Albany issued an indictment charging David Kruger with kidnapping and murder in connection with Rebecca Martinez's death. The indictment was based on the DNA evidence, circumstantial evidence placing him in Millbrook during the relevant time period, and testimony from witnesses who had observed his suspicious behavior as a teenager. The arrest warrant was executed at Kruger's apartment in Buffalo, where he was taken into custody without incident. Federal agents also executed search warrants at his residence and workplace, recovering additional evidence that would support the prosecution's case. The news of David Kruger's arrest sent shockwaves through Millbrook and the broader Hudson Valley community. Local residents, who had lived with the mystery of Rebecca Martinez's disappearance for over 3 decades, struggled to process the revelation that her killer had been a troubled teenager living among them all along. The fact that Kruger had attended the same high school as Rebecca, walked the same streets, and potentially interacted with the same people created a profound sense of unease and betrayal. Miguel and Carmen Martinez, now in their 70s, received the news from FBI Special Agent Rodriguez during a private meeting at their home. The couple had maintained their residence in Millbrook throughout the decades, refusing to abandon the place where their daughter had last been seen alive. Carmen Martinez's reaction was a mixture of relief, grief, and exhaustion after 34 years of uncertainty. The confirmation that Rebecca was indeed dead, while devastating, provided the closure the family had desperately sought. The Martinez family held a press conference 3 days after Kruger's arrest, standing on the steps of the Millbrook Police Department, where they had first reported their daughter missing in 1988. Carmen Martinez, supported by her husband and surrounded by extended family members, thanked the FBI and law enforcement officials who had never given up on the case. She also acknowledged the community members who had kept Rebecca's memory alive through decades of uncertainty. Media coverage of the arrest was extensive, with national news outlets picking up the story as an example of how modern forensic science could solve decades-old crimes. The case was featured on major television networks, true crime podcasts, and newspaper front pages across the country. Many reports focused on the role of DNA technology and genetic databases in finally bringing justice to the Martinez family. The revelation that Kruger had been a juvenile at the time of the crime sparked discussions about how the original investigation had overlooked potential teenage suspects. Former Millbrook Police Chief Robert Kellerman, now retired, acknowledged in interviews that the department's focus on adult suspects had been a critical error. The assumption that such a violent crime could only have been committed by an adult had blinded investigators to the possibility of a juvenile perpetrator. Millbrook High School, where both Rebecca and Kruger had been students, held a memorial service to honor Rebecca's memory and provide closure for the community. Many of Rebecca's former classmates, now middle-aged adults with children of their own, attended the service to pay their respects and reflect on how the case had shaped their understanding of safety and trust in their hometown. The legal proceedings against Kruger moved forward with remarkable speed, considering the age of the case. Federal prosecutors, armed with DNA evidence and witness testimony, presented a compelling case that left little room for doubt about Kruger's guilt. His defense attorneys attempted to challenge the reliability of the decades-old evidence, but forensic experts testified to the validity of the DNA analysis and the proper chain of custody for the physical evidence. In September 2022, David Kruger pleaded guilty to federal charges of kidnapping, resulting in death, avoiding a trial that would have forced the Martinez family to endure additional trauma. The plea agreement included a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that Kruger would never again pose a threat to society. The sentencing hearing provided an opportunity for the Martinez family to address Kruger directly and share the impact of Rebecca's loss on their lives. Carmen Martinez delivered a victim impact statement that detailed 34 years of grief, uncertainty, and the gradual erosion of hope. She described how Rebecca's disappearance had affected not only her immediate family, but also the broader community that had loved and supported her daughter. The resolution of Rebecca Martinez's case became a symbol of hope for other families dealing with missing loved ones. The Rebecca Martinez Foundation, established by her mother decades earlier, experienced a surge in donations and volunteer support following the arrest. The foundation announced plans to expand its services and advocacy efforts, using Rebecca's story to promote improvements in missing person investigations and support for affected families. The case also highlighted the importance of preserving evidence from unsolved crimes, even when initial forensic analysis proves inconclusive. The careful preservation of Rebecca's clothing and other physical evidence by the New York State Police had made the eventual DNA match possible, demonstrating the value of maintaining hope that future technological advances might provide answers. Today, Rebecca Martinez's story serves as a reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still prevail through the dedication of law enforcement professionals and the power of advancing forensic science.